As the conflict between Iran and the US-led coalition intensifies, Tehran is signaling a dangerous new front, the world's undersea fiber-optic cables. Iranian state-linked media has explicitly warned that the concentration of critical data cables in the Strait of Hormuz creates a vulnerable point for the region's digital economy, and by extension, the global one. The digital choke point. The Strait of Hormuz is not only the world's most important oil choke point, it has also become one of its most critical digital choke points. Specifically, the Bab al-Mandab Strait actions at the Strait of Hormuz could be duplicated in this narrow waterway below the sea level. Coming up in today's program, Bab al-Mandab and undersea cables. The Strait of Hormuz is known for being a transit energy hub, but so is the Bab al-Mandab Strait. The U.S. is treading on water when it threatens Iran with military action, threatening the opening of the strait as well. World internet threat. Aside from oil and gas, both the Bab al-Mandab and the Strait of Hormuz are digital choke points. Not only do the fiber optic cables lying on the seabeds are transit points for data and communications, over $1 trillion in financial transactions flow through these important cables. Our third headline, U.S. siege, war risks, and internet shutdown. The U.S. naval blockade and threats of military action risk an economic meltdown regionally and worldwide if these cables were damaged, something which the U.S. appears not to take into consideration, just like faulty intel on the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to be discussing those points and a whole lot more with Dr. Sergio Rossi, full professor and chair of macroeconomics and monetary economics at the University of Fribourg in Switzerland, and also Dr. Bilal Bagis, Istanbul or Turkey-based economist, instructor, strategist, columnist, and also consultant.
Thank you for inviting me. Fiber-optic is much more important for the world economy than what you mentioned, especially because it provides a number of instant services like instant payments, and also for information and communication strategies for financial transactions. So it would be better if the United States understood that this is not going to be ended very shortly unless the Trump administration stops addressing these issues very furiously and stops the war to Iran.
The growing vulnerability of submarine cables in the Red Sea, particularly at the Bab al-Mandab Strait, is an underappreciated threat to global digital stability, with around 17 cables passing through this narrow corridor and carrying up to 20% of the world's internet traffic. Any disruption in this region, whether accidental or deliberate, could have major consequences for global communications, commerce, and security. What makes this issue even more concerning is the limited legal protection, a lack of coordinated international oversight, and minimal physical security around these cables.
actually, the United States administration has taken this into account. On the contrary, it is just a wait, stop and go strategy, which is quite messy. And in the end, it's going to be very dangerous for the United States itself, in particular for the US economy, the financial system, but also households, firms, because all these increases the price of oil and its own derivatives, which means that the cost of living in the United States is going to be higher. All kinds of goods and services that households buy in the United States are much more expensive. We noticed this already. So in the end, the United States has to increase, the Federal Reserve has to increase its own policy rates of interest. This will reduce the investment expenditure by firms. It will increase the public sector deficits, and eventually we will see the midterm election. I think the Democratic Party will win, and then in the end, this is going to be quite messy for the U.S. policy and decisions as regards the administration. I think it would be better to have a peace and then to have a kind of cooperation between different countries in order to have a further period of economic growth, prosperity, and financial stability eventually.
This is the social section of the program. Orange Man has 3 different cards. Number 1 is continuing the blockade, which means overburdening costs and regime change in the U.S. Option number 2, start bombing Iran again, which means Iran's retaliation and complete Hormuz choke, plus Bab el-Mandab disruption, which means, again, overburdening costs and regime change in the U.S. Option number 3 is having troops on the ground and then bodies will go back home. Regime change in the U.S. is going to be the best option for Donald Trump to fold. Otherwise, he's going to suffer. The Bab el-Mandab carries 15+ undersea cables, twice as much as Hormuz, transmitting 90% of all Europe-Asia bandwidth. A single dragged anchor damaged 15 cables in the strait in September 2025. Iran would control the digital connection between the world's 2 largest economic zones. The Strait of Hormuz, a digital bottleneck. Undersea cables give Iran leverage over U.S. big tech and also the Wall Street. Iran is mulling a toll on fiber-optic undersea cables running through the Strait of Hormuz, a move mirroring its existing transit fees for ships. The reported plan would require multinational tech firms such as Google, Microsoft, Meta, and Amazon to operate under Iranian law and pay licensing fees for laying and operating cables through the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. Press TV exposes a devastating reality. Unlike the Strait of Hormuz, there are no alternative pipelines for the Bab el-Mandab Strait. A closure guarantees soaring oil prices and a 600% shipping surge. Washington's disastrous policies risk massive global starvation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. The global economy is, or maybe it was up until Trump, more connected today than it has ever been before, I would say. especially energy trade, supply chain, finance, or technology connectivity or interconnectedness, it is at unprecedented levels. And located in the very middle is adjacent to the global trade, energy, finance hubs in the Gulf region, especially at the intersection of East-West energy and trade connectivity. Iran definitely has a huge leverage. And of course, the fiber optic cables or energy or LNG infrastructure, even trade connectivity, they are all part of the equation concerning the region and Iran itself and other regional powers likewise. Most global internet traffic also travels through undersea fiber optic cables, and several important systems actually pass through the Gulf region and nearby maritime corridors. Iran could surely damage or disrupt undersea fiber optic cables in or near the strategic choke points. Though as much as it is willing to retaliate, it will still need to work with the aggressors, probably their first best option, I would say. And let's not forget that it will likely lead to longer-term inflationary and even some real impacts looking forward. And due to the damaged energy infrastructure across the Gulf, critical exports like oil, gas, chemicals, fertilizers, they will all remain largely negatively impacted.
Securing the Red Sea's seabed requires both national action and global cooperation. Experts call for cable-specific laws, criminalizing interference and streamlining repair permits, critical infrastructure status to prioritize protection and deterrence, regional coordination, especially among Red Sea littoral states, international agreements to update outdated treaties and deter state-sponsored sabotage.
Attracting more attention towards especially Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb, each accounting for 10 to 20% of global energy trade especially. So over 10% of global energy trade and over a quarter of maritime container trade or traffic in particular, China supplies, Iran's shutdown of the Strait and U.S. naval blockade of the Iranian ports. So far, they have all led to huge negative costs. And even in peacetime, if you look at the figures, 20% of the world's oil and gas is shipped from producers in that region, the Gulf towards the open oceans. Bab el-Mandeb road in particular, it matters due to global trade connectivity, of course, but also it is highly and strategically militarized, and it also is very important for energy security. The region is also important for undersea fiber optic cables, just like the Persian Gulf, and disruptions could affect internet connectivity, financial systems, cloud services, and even telecommunication, among others. Iran itself and its allies in the region, they are giving huge leverage for the Iranian side of the war.
This is the info news section of the program. Iran's stock market reopening. The banking and car sectors were present in today's trading. More than 40 listed companies that were damaged during the war era, mainly in the chemical and base metal sectors, have not yet resumed trading. The CEO of Tehran Securities Exchange said, today with the reopening of the stock exchange, individuals have invested more than 2 trillion tomans into the capital market. U.S. war on Iran. The economic shock of the war will hit the world in 4 different ways. The impact of the conflict will not stop at energy price hikes. It will spread to various sectors and last years. Our special investigation revealed that the stock that begins in a tankered lane in the Persian Gulf eventually arrives in the price of bread in Cairo, the cost of rice in Dhaka, and the fertilizer ration of a smallholder in western Kenya. Safe haven debt appended. $50 trillion safe haven debt market appended by Iran war inflation. Investors in the safe haven of G7 debt want protection as the conflict in West Asia threatens another bout of inflation. Loans more expensive than ever. Could the Iran war make mortgages, loans, and credit more expensive? Borrowing costs in major economies have hit their highest levels in nearly 2 decades. Investors have been shunning government debts and demanding higher returns. They worry that Iran war could keep oil prices and inflation high. This is the in-depth section of the program. Unlike pipelines or satellites, submarine cables have no standing army, no strong treaty framework, and few dedicated patrols. Most countries regulate them under telecom law with patchy enforcement and limited emergency powers. The cables in the Bab al-Mandab Strait are not just wires for local connectivity, they are the nervous system of the global economy. Their vulnerability is everyone's problem. Beneath the waters of the Strait of Hormuz, where Iran's territorial sea extends 21 nautical miles and overlaps completely with Omani jurisdiction, leaving no high seas whatsoever, lie at least 5 major submarine fiber-optic cable systems. These cables carry approximately 99% of all intercontinental internet traffic and an estimated $10 trillion in daily financial transactions. The key cables at risk are cited right here, like the AAE-1, which connects major Europe, Asia, Africa link and landings in the UAE, Oman, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Or the Falcon, which links India and Sri Lanka to Persian Gulf countries and Egypt. These connectivity points form the backbone of the digital economy, not just for the Persian Gulf region, but the entire globe. Now, on that point, let us bring in Dr. Sergio Ross, full professor and chair of macroeconomics and monetary economics at the University of Fribourg in Switzerland. The question that I had, Professor, is this. Given how the consequences far outweigh any chances of U.S. strikes, how likely do you see Donald Trump waging another war of aggression on Iran again?
Well, I'm not in a position to address the question because you need psychology to answer this question. But on economic grounds, I think it is very unlucky where Trump will continue this war because it has some boomerang effects on political grounds, but particularly on economic grounds as regards the United States as a whole. And I think that the US dollar is going to lose its weight across the global economic system, especially as regards financial transactions. A number of countries have been already de-dollarizing their own economic systems, in particular their own financial transactions, and some new currencies are emerging, perhaps not Chinese yuan, but some other currencies that might be used bilaterally or multilaterally between different countries in the so-called global south. And if the US dollar is going to lose its weight across the global economy, then the United States are going to suffer much more than the rest of the world. But this might be also a problem for the Trump administration, because if Donald Trump doesn't understand this, he's going to increase its own aggressivity and increase perhaps even the war against Iran. But in the end, all parties involved are going to lose on humanitarian grounds, but also on economic grounds. And this eventually might also have a political result that the next administration is going to be for Democrats and not for Republicans in the United States.
Iran has announced that it can demand payment from Google, Microsoft, and Meta for these cables, like licensing fees on submarine fiber optic cables. There is one problem, though. U.S. sanctions law make it illegal for American companies to send payments to the Iranian entities, meaning compliance is not a legal option here. Iran knows this. The demand, therefore, is leverage, not an invoice, unless, of course, sanctions are removed. The scramble has accelerated since Iran's retaliatory strikes hit Amazon facilities in the Persian Gulf and threatened both choke points through which virtually the whole region data's traffic flows. Although importance has been placed on energy transit, digital connectivity never got the same treatment. Now Persian Gulf states are trying to replicate that for data. Not only have they built oil pipelines to avoid Hormuz, it's now doing the same for data. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, they have been financing compelling data corridors through Syria, Iraq, and East Africa to bypass the two maritime choke points that threaten their digital connectivity. Now, on that final point, let me bring in our other guest, Dr. Bilal Bagis, Istanbul and Turkey-based economist, instructor, strategist, columnist, and consultant. Doctor, the question that I wanted to pose is, given that Iran and the U.S. may enter talks and there are diplomatic movements forward right now, is there a chance that this will be resolved, or will the differences remain leading to a military escalation again between Iran and the U.S.?
At least to some extent, this tension will likely persist. And just like the other geopolitical tensions in Ukraine or Palestine. That said, and honestly, I don't expect any rational decision on Trump's side either, given his inconsistency earlier tariff wars during Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0, and his aggressive Greenland, Canada, etc. Rhetorics, even annexation plans. His actions are usually based upon his personal instincts or confrontational rhetoric over institutional continuity and long-term strategic planning, especially for a country like the U.S., and they do not look that promising, actually. Of course, we can't be sure about what the hell is going on behind closed doors.
Iran can freeze the global economy with one anchor. Everyone's eyes are glued to U.S. missiles, airstrike, sanctions, but Iran doesn't need any of that. The true major leverage is on the seafloor. Fiber optic cables, the veins of the global economy, are entirely exposed. These are physical lines, mostly unguarded, mapped publicly, and vulnerable to anyone with a boat. The U.S. has risked the Strait of Hormuz and now further undermining the global economy through the possibility of the closure of the Bab al-Mandab and the fiber optic cables that lies on the sea floor. This is a 1-2-3 punch that would lead to a knockout. And this is the website page of Economic Divide. Feel free to browse through all of our previous programs and tell us how you're doing. I'm Kiarash Pounemati, and I'll see you next week.